Oh my God. Okay. Good times. Hello and welcome. This thing, okay, I'm like, this is not working like it usually works, but okay, whatever. We're just gonna jump right in. Hello, my friends. As usual, I'm fucking late. Sorry about that. It's 10:05, 10:05, 10:06. Okay, so welcome. Thank you for tuning in. Oh, look, there's like more than one of you on here. Usually I start these things and it's like nobody's here. You know what? I am such a, here I am not being self-compassionate. I was about to say I'm such a jerk for starting late. So I appreciate you tuning in, and I'm going to try to be self-compassionate with myself. Hey, Jesse, and not beat myself up about being late. Okay. So I have this thing starting at 11. At 11, I'm having a group coaching call with my, hi, Kelly. Kelly, I saw you join the group. I'm so thrilled you're here, my friend. At 11, I have this coaching call with my Build a Butt friends. So I need to not let myself like wander all over the place today with my usual things. But you'll be glad to hear that I have my notes with me, which is excellent because, as you know, I always do way better with notes. I am so thrilled. Karen, I saw you join the group last night. I'm so thrilled to have you here. Karen is a longtime student of mine, yoga student of mine. So Karen, I'm thrilled you're here. Kelly, I'm thrilled you're here. Everybody, I'm thrilled you're here. Thanks for watching. Okay. So today I want to talk to you guys about self-compassion. Self-compassion is a particular interest of mine because radical self-love is a particular interest of mine, and I have come to realize that self-compassion, for me at least, is a key component of radical self-love. And I recently discovered this writer, Kristin Neff. Kristin Neff is a psychology researcher, and she's done a ton of work on self-compassion. And she wrote this book, and she's got some great exercises in this book that I have definitely used. Some of them I discovered through her, and then some of the things that she describes are things that I was already doing from other parts of my life. So that's cool. So my friends who are watching, can you give me a heads up that you can hear me okay? I want to make sure that you can hear me before I start laying all this down. Okay. So, and if you can't hear me, I'm going to put my headphones on. So, self-compassion. Self-compassion is a part of radical self-love. And one of the ways that I have come to understand, okay, good, Kelly, thank you. One of the ways that I have come to understand radical self-love is that it is a practice. So I would love to be able to tell you, and I would love it for myself, if radical self-love were the kind of thing where you just wake up one day and you're like, I've decided I'm going to radically self-love myself. That would be amazing. And I do feel like deciding that you are going to practice radical self-love is an important component to practicing it. I do feel like there comes a point in your life or what have you when you're like, I really am tired of treating myself this way. I'm really tired of feeling like crap about myself. I really want to love myself more. So I do feel there is a moment when you make a decision that can be really helpful and wonderful and useful. But the way that radical self-love works and the way that self-compassion works, and in fact, the way that, well, I'll get to that in just a minute. The way that those things work is that they are practices. You have to recommit to them again and again. Because the way that self-hatred works, or any type of, I don't know, I feel like self-hatred's a strong word. Another phrase that gets used by my other sort of teacher in this realm, my other idol in this realm, Sonia Renee Taylor, she talks about body terrorism, which is a thing I'm going to do a whole other Facebook Live about. Body terrorism, which is when you are constantly imposing these very negative judgments of your body on yourself, and imposing these judgments on other people, right? So body terrorism, self-hatred, lack of self-respect, self-contempt, right? These are all things that that come up again and again and again, or that's my experience. My friends in the chat, you can tell me whether you have that experience as well. Like, I certainly don't find that practicing radical self-love for me is a one and done kind of a situation. So it's more like you have to say, it's more like one day you wake up and you're like, I want to love myself deeply and radically, and I'm going to practice that. And I just want to highlight the corollaries between that and practicing any type of thought work that pushes back against these big oppressive systems that are present in our culture and in our lives. So, for example, if you want to practice anti-racism, this is definitely true for myself as a white person. That's something that I have to work on every single freaking day. Every day I have to wake up and think about how I can push back against the racism in our culture. When it comes to the sexism in our culture, right? That's something that, because I directly experienced that, I certainly have to wake up every day and experience that and decide whether that day I need to practice some self-care about it, or whether that day I'm going to push back against it, right? So self-compassion can help with all of these practices. So Kristen Neff has these 3 elements of self-compassion that she talks about. So the 3 components to self-compassion for her are self-kindness, mindfulness, and recognizing the common human experience. And I'm going to talk about all 3 of those. And she doesn't see it as a kind of a thing where you have to start with mindfulness and then proceed to self-kindness and then proceed to recognizing the common human experience. She feels that you can start with any one of those 3 and use that as a kind of portal to experience the other 2. And I have found that the 3 are interlocking. So when I'm practicing recognizing the common human experience, it often just flows right into self-kindness. And in order to even recognize that, you have to be practicing mindfulness, right? But we're going to talk about self-kindness first. So first component of self-kindness that she talks about is dialing down the critical voice. So we all have that horrible voice within us that just talks freaking trash, that just says horrible, hurtful things to us about ourselves, right? That self that when you replay an action that you took from the past, it's sort of it's saying things to you like, why did you do that? That was so stupid. It's horrible. You're such a horrible person. You're a narcissist, right? You can insert whatever your personal self-critical voices there, right? So one of Neff's suggestions for how you can dial down that internal voice is, first of all, to think about how a friend would talk to you, because chances are good that the ways that you talk to yourself, the ways that we talk to ourselves, are not at all the ways that we would talk to a friend. Like, in general, when you think about how that critical voice treats you, chances are good you would never speak to a friend like that. Hi, Susan Ann. Nice to see you, my dear. You show up in this conversation, actually, a little bit further on. The other suggestion that Neff has is, she says that you can respond to the voice, to the critical voice itself, with compassion. So that critical voice inside you, it's like maybe it's the distillation of your parents, or it's the distillation of all your most horrible thoughts and feelings about yourself, right? She says that you can respond to that voice in a compassionate way. For example, listen, this part of myself, I know you're trying to keep me safe. But that point of view that you're expressing is not helpful, right? And the other thing that she talks about that dovetails with this other practice that I do, which is called tapping, is she talks about having sort of alternative mantras, an alternative thing that you say to yourself. So instead of letting the critical voice just go crazy inside your consciousness or inside your head, you can have an alternative thing that you say to yourself. So there's this practice that I've made use of recently that I learned in the last couple of years that I love, and it's called tapping. And the way that tapping works, I think it has a technical name. I should find out what the technical name is. But basically, I think there's under 10 spots, but there's these spots on your body that you tap while you're saying affirmations to yourself. And I can do a presentation or a Facebook Live about tapping in a more in-depth way. But the way that it works is that you tap, and while you're tapping, you're saying versions of I deeply and completely love and accept myself. This is a classic version, I think, of an affirmation that it sounds totally hokey and goofy. Like when I describe it to you, I'm like, oh my God, they're going to think this is nuts. And also, if you grew up like I did watching Al Franken on Saturday Night Live, being Stuart Smalley, who looks in the mirror and says, I'm good enough and I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me. Doing affirmations like this can feel really goofy and I don't know, you just feel like, well, what am I doing with this? But they really genuinely work. I cannot tell you how much value, how much self-compassion and alleviation of suffering I have gotten from I deeply and completely love and accept myself. Yeah, right? Karen knows that. Karen knows the Stuart Smalley thing. It's so goofy. Um, so try it. It's a technique, right? The next time you're talking trash to yourself, you can experiment with dialing down the critical voice and dialing up something about self-acceptance. And you can pick your own mantra. So I deeply and completely love and accept myself really works for me. But it may be that that mantra doesn't really work for you. It may be that you need a different one. Kathy, hey Kathy, yeah, Kathy's like talking about not just silencing the critic, but also thanking it for trying to protect us, right? Because you don't want to give, and Kristen Neff gives this example in her book. She talks about how you don't want to respond to the harsh and critical voice in a harsh and critical tone. That's the strategy that Dr. Neff advocates, right? So I know some people have a practice of saying to the harsh inner voice something like, I don't know, shut the fuck up, you bitch. Something like that, just to throw an F-bomb in there, spice things up. But Dr. Neff says, listen, you don't have to respond in that way. Like you don't need to meet harshness with harshness, right? That you can meet that harsh voice. You can actually practice self-kindness to that harsh voice, because here's the thing. That harsh voice is part of you. That harsh voice is part of you. That creature within you that speaks to you in that way, that is not some alien part of you that doesn't belong to you, right? And in my opinion, to try to treat that critical voice as something that is separate from you is it's like denying the shadow within you, right? One of my heroes is Carl Jung, who's a great classic psychotherapist. And Carl Jung, his whole work, he talks about, I'm going to get this quote wrong, but he talks about how our work is not to deny the shadow, it's to make the darkness within ourselves conscious, to make the darkness conscious, right? So this work isn't about trying to quash that internal voice that says all that crappy shit to you, right? Or trying to, or coming up with new and inventive ways to tell that inner voice that she sucks. You can respond to that internal voice as well with self-kindness, because it is a part of you. The way that this used to show up for me when I was teaching yoga, or that it still shows up for me when I teach, is that I will often talk to my students about how, like when students sit down, say somebody sits down and they sit down cross-legged, they'll have one knee that's up and one knee that's down. And oftentimes the temptation will be to act like or ask questions in such a way that it makes it clear that they consider the knee that is down to be the like correct knee, or that's the knee, or that's the hip flexor that really is mine. That's the way things should be. And this knee that is up is the problem. And we have this tendency to sort of like disown that part of ourselves. Certainly there is this entire way that we like to disown parts of our psyches and parts of our bodies, right? And part of what this group, part of like one big theme I'm trying to explore in all the feels is this theme of really allowing ourselves to feel parts of our bodies that historically we haven't allowed ourselves to feel, and to feel parts of our psyches that we don't allow ourselves to feel, and in fact, to feel and perceive these larger forces at play in our culture that are oppressing us, forces like racism and sexism and homophobia, transphobia, all of those big forces. That's really sort of what I'm trying to dial into in this group. That's the big theme of all the feels. So dialing down the critical voice, and you can speak kindly to it, you thank it. Having an alternative mantra, yeah, Miriam, having an alternative thing that you say to yourself, and it doesn't have to be my goofy one, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. Make up your own. Like, go for a walk and think about, what do I want to say to myself? What's the thing I really need to hear? I think you'll find this very rich and compelling. Okay, and then the other thing that she talks about, so she talks about dialing down the critical voice and dialing up being nurturing and kind to yourself. And part of that might be this thing of having a different mantra that you say to yourself. I deeply and completely love and accept myself. And part of it, the other thing she talks about, and I think this is really interesting and key, is she talks about self-touch. So this is another thing that might sound really goofy, but I have tried it and it freaking works. So one of the exercises that she describes in her book is the exercise of hugging yourself. Yeah, and she describes it in much more detail, but what it really comes down to is something kind of like this. Yeah, taking time, hugging yourself, embracing yourself. She talks about stroking your skin. She talks about how, so you guys may know about the hormone oxytocin, right? That's the hormone that is released when you have an orgasm or when women breastfeed. Um, Oxytocin is the hormone that makes those types of physical connectedness experiences feel so potent and moving. Why they are so transcendent, right? When you, I don't know, when you have really awesome, fabulous sex, right? Like oxytocin is released into your bloodstream. And she talks about how oxytocin can also be can also be released through self-touch. So stroking yourself, hugging yourself, and I hope this isn't a triggering thing to say for people, but masturbation, like touching yourself in a loving way. And it can be sexual, or it doesn't have to be sexual at all, right? It can just be stroking yourself, stroking your own hair. Can I tell you something also? This, I hope this isn't TMI or doesn't feel too personal, but I love having my hair stroked. Like when I was a little girl, I used to, and I snuggled and I would cuddle with my mom. She would always stroke my hair in a particular way. And a few years ago, at the advice of a therapist, I started coaching my husband. I taught my husband how it is exactly that my mother used to stroke my hair, because I find that very soothing and comforting, right? So you can coach somebody else to touch you in a way that makes you feel comfortable, or that makes you feel soothed. You can self-soothe yourself, right? If it's stroking your hair or whatever it is, yes? Anyway. So that's the first component, self-kindness. Another component, right? So I'm doing first, second, third, but they don't have to be first, second, third, right? They can be, you can dive in at any point in the circle, okay? So another thing that she talks about is mindfulness. So mindfulness, just being more aware of what your internal environment is like in general. This is part of what I mean when I talk about feeling yourself, yeah? So specifically stopping to notice moments of suffering. Like what is, so often you'll be beating yourself up and about something, and it's like you don't even know you're doing it. Like, have you guys had this experience where it'll often happen to me when I'm doing something else like driving. I'm driving somewhere and on the inside, I'm like on the outside, I'm paying attention to driving. And if anybody observed me, they wouldn't observe this. But on the inside, I am seething about something. And maybe it's a thing where I'm seething. I'm mad at my husband about something and or like my mom. I'm seething about something on the inside. And then I get to wherever I'm going and I don't even really remember what I was thinking about, but I feel like crap, right? And the same thing will happen sometimes with like negative self-talk or what have you. Like on the inside, I'll be saying all these horrible things to myself or thinking about something that leaves me racked with shame. And I don't even really realize that's what's happening, but then I arrive to my next thing and I feel like I'm in a terrible mood or I snap at my dog or what have you, right? Because I don't even really notice what I'm doing to myself. Yeah, okay, so Kathy is mentioning butterfly tapping. I'll have to look that up, Kathy. That sounds interesting. That's like tapping. Jesse says, my grandmother used to draw on my foreheads with her fingers softly, just remembering, so relaxing. Yeah. This is a cool thing to do, guys. Allow yourself to remember those types of touch that you received when you were a kid, when you were a child, that made you feel nurtured and loved. And like, you don't have to try to imagine it now. Like, that's another good thing. If you like go for a walk or sit down quietly without your phone with the intention to think about this, I bet that a flood of memories will come to you of kind, loving touch that you received when you were a kid. And that is so valuable to tap into, first of all, because you just to relive those memories is so meaningful and beautiful, right? I remember, I also have a memory of my grandmother combing my hair. I have all these memories about, it was always a big joke with my dad that I would come to him when I needed a hug, and we would call it a chin hug because I would put my head underneath his chin. Um, those are precious, right? To think back on those things. But then the other thing is, then you can start to offer those types of touch to yourself, and you can coach other people in your life to give you those types of touch, right? Those are ways to practice self-kindness. So back to mindfulness. Specifically stopping to notice moments of suffering, noticing when you're being a dickhead to yourself, right? Notice when you're being really harsh to yourself. And then allowing yourself to feel the suffering, not necessarily jumping to address it or fix it, right? But allowing yourself to feel that shame or that disappointment with yourself or what have you, not necessarily jumping right away to try to address it. So sometimes when you're noticing this suffering, I think I talked about this a little bit before, right? So sometimes you're saying horrible words to yourself, right? Sometimes what'll be happening is you'll actually be saying something to yourself where that was so stupid. I can't believe I did that. But a thing that I feel like for me happens more often is that I actually don't feel, and it's weird because I'm a very verbal person, but I don't feel like when I'm doing a self-critical frenzy, right? Or like fiesta, I don't feel like what's happening is that I'm saying actual words to myself. You might have this experience yourself where it's not necessarily that you're saying stuff to yourself with sentences. For me, the way it shows up is that there will be a cascade of images or memories, and then an overwhelming feeling of shame about it, right? Or self-disappointment or like anger at myself, or then it'll morph into anger at the other people who were involved in the situation, right? So it may be that you have critical self-talk, and it may be that you have critical I don't even know what the hell you would call that, right? Critical self-images? I don't know what you would call that. But that's a thing that happens. So again, just stopping to notice, being mindful of like, what is happening with that? What, like, I'm feeling lousy about something. What is it? How do I feel? Allowing yourself to feel it. And that's again part of this, not like allowing the darkness to be more conscious. I just have here a James Baldwin quote. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced, right? So you got to let yourself feel. Facing yourself takes courage. It is not an easy thing to turn into the wind, and allow yourself to feel things. But one of my core beliefs is that we can get stronger at feeling this stuff, right? That each of us is bigger than the emotion, than the individual emotions that we have inside us. This has been one of the sort of central themes or practices of my adult life, really, is this theme or practice of acknowledging or taking the point of view, starting with the point of view that I am bigger than any one emotion that I experience within myself, that those emotions, even when they feel overpowering and terrifying, I am bigger than my shame. I am bigger than my anger. I am bigger than my loneliness, right? These are not emotions I live with every day, right? But that's part of the human experience, is to feel that stuff, right? And I always like to make it clear that any of the stuff I talk about in my work, I'm not coming at it from a point of view of like, I'm a master. I'm a master and I've mastered these things, right? The point of view I always think about this. It's the point of view I took in 20 years of teaching movement. It's the point of view I take in everything I teach, is that like I'm a practitioner. I'm just trying my best, right? So like loneliness, anger, shame, disgust, we are bigger than the individual emotions that we have inside us. Yeah. We are strong enough to hold those big feelings, and we can get stronger at holding them and processing them. And when you practice feeling those big feelings in a supportive environment, you can get even more adept at feeling and holding them. And a supportive environment may look like a relationship with a counselor or a therapist. It may be just a friend that you can confide in. It might be that you have a relationship with a teacher. It might be that you have a relationship with a community, that becomes the kind of container that allows you to feel these feelings. But my main thing, of course, is if you're struggling, don't go it alone, right? Big feelings of shame, anger, grief, all of those things. If you're struggling with those things, like talk to somebody about them. Okay. So then the third component that Dr. Neff talks about, the third component to self-compassion, is recognizing our common human experience. So this relates to something that Susan Ann posted in the group, actually, in the post about self-compassion. She said that going on Reddit literally helped her practice more self-compassion. So Reddit, if you don't know it, Reddit is this big message board website, and you got to be careful when you go on there, because there's I think they've gotten more adept at cracking down on groups that are, I don't know, sexist and white supremacist and horrible with that. But you just want to be mindful that Reddit, or at least a couple of years ago, they had a rep for not being very cracked down on their community. But I think they've been improving, but B, the other thing about them is that they do really silo the message boards and the groups. And I'm in a couple of boards on there. I'm in one about skincare, because I'm obsessed with skincare. And Susan Ann talked about how going on Reddit groups and seeing people share their experiences, right? Maybe about self-compassion, maybe about other things, helped her really understand that we are all human beings, that we all have these experiences of those big emotions that I talked about, right? That's one of the ways, in fact, that I feel the internet has been amazing. So it's really tempting to only think about the ways that the internet sucks, right? To only think about the ways that Facebook sucks. But one of the marvelous things about the internet is that you can go online and you can find other people who feel like you, for better and for worse, right? You can find other people that feel like you. So do you guys remember that series of ads they had a while ago? It was, I think it was called the It Gets Better campaign, right? This was an ad campaign, a public service ad campaign they had a few years ago that had really prominent LGBTQIA people coming on and speaking directly to youth about how it gets better. And the whole point of the campaign was that it was an attempt to drive down the suicide rate of LGBTQIA youth because it's so high. And one of the speakers as a part of this campaign, I don't remember who it was. I thought it was Tim Gunn, but I don't think that's right because the timeline doesn't match up. But one of them talked about what it was like to grow up in like rural, I don't know, Kansas, which is where I'm from, and not have any role models at all for what it was to be a happy and successful and thriving gay person, and how the internet freaking saved their life because they could go online and they could see that there are other people out there that feel the way that I do, that struggle with the things that I deal with, right? That is such a profoundly huge realization. Any freaking problem you're having, any problem that you're having, Dan Savage suggests, Maria Christina, might have been Dan. I think it was yeah, it might have been Dan. That's I think he's about our age, right? The timeline works out for that, right? But any emotion that you're having is an emotion that somebody else has experienced. Anything you're going through, even the most private, shameful, weird situation that you have in your life, somebody else has experienced that, right? Each of us is totally unique. There will never be another you on planet Earth. There has never been a you. There will never be another you. You are the product of this unbelievably serendipitous cosmos that we live in. You are a completely unique person. And at the same time, the bullshit that you go through is not unique. The bullshit that we all experience as human beings, again, the grief, the shame, the loneliness, there are people out there who have experienced it or who have experienced a similar enough version of that they can talk to you about it, right? That they can share with you about it. And what Dr. Neff is saying is that this practice of being aware of other people and other people's struggles will actually help you be more compassionate to yourself. I just love that. I love thinking, what I really love to do is I'll take a hero of mine. If I'm feeling really crappy about something or down on myself about something, I will often think about a hero of mine, and I will, if I know something about their life, if I've read a biography of theirs, I might go back and reread it, right? And I will look for situations where they talk about feeling shame, or situations where they've been through things that have been shameful. Or disappointing or filled with grief, right? Or things that made them angry. And I just remind myself, any idol or hero I have has struggled with this stuff. Any hero that you have, Michelle Obama, Barack Obama, anybody that you look up to is somebody who has struggled with these feelings, right? Okay, so that's what I wanted to tell you about Dr. Neff's framework for self-compassion, right? So now I want to talk about something else that's sort of adjacent to that. So one of my big sources for self-compassion, one of the things that really helped me get more compassionate with myself over the last, 3 or 4 years is personality tests. So, there's one in particular that I took called the Clifton Strengths Test, and I'm going to talk more about that in just a second. So in the last few years, I've gotten a bunch of coaching. I reached a point in my life and in my business where I really felt like I needed coaching. I needed help to start to deal with some of the things that I felt within myself that were sort of holding me back from being able to live the life that I wanted to lead. And one of the key components of some of the coaching that I've gotten in the last few years has been taking a particular personality test called the Clifton Strengths test. So for those of you that don't know, some of you know this about me because I talk about it fairly frequently, but I have ADD, and I got diagnosed as an adult, and I had it all through my childhood, obviously, and my youth. I didn't get diagnosed. I'm 43 now. I didn't get diagnosed with ADD until, like, I don't know, maybe I was 33 or something like that, maybe a decade ago. And what they told me at the time was, well, you have ADD, but you're very high functioning. So I was like, well, do I need to take a pill? And I kind of experimented with taking medication for it, and medication didn't work for me. But I'm very, in general, pro taking a pill if that helps you, right? I'm not anti-medication at all. It just didn't work out for me. I tried a couple of different kinds. They weren't for me. And then I was like, well, should I get, so then they actually said to me, well, you could get coaching about it. And I was like, okay, so I didn't really do much about that. I couldn't afford it at the time. But that's part of why I actually ultimately did seek coaching, is because I was like, I want to be doing different things in my life. And I feel very held back by my ADD, or very held back by the way that I am in this world. So the thing about it is that ADD really impacted my self-talk. Like, I would be critical of myself all the time about things that I don't want to say that they were outside of my control, but they were very, very difficult for me to control. Like for example, the fact that I'm often late for things, that is related to the way that I have a hard time with time, right? And that's related to ADD. So my negative self-talk about this was very powerful and overwhelming. So one of the things that my coaches had me do, and this coach was not an ADD coach, right? This is a business coach of mine, and so I'm in this coaching program for business. The main coach's name is Rachel Rogers. She's amazing. And then my friend Natalie Miller is a coach in Rachel's company, and I've learned a lot from Natalie. You hear me talk about her all the time on these things. So as part of the Rachel Rogers program, they have you take what's called the Clifton Strengths test. And the way that the Clifton Strengths test works is they have these 34 strengths that they've identified. And it's not that you don't have the strengths that are further down on your list. Basically, you take the test, and then the test identifies in order which strengths are your strongest, right? So at the end of it, you get a printout that orders the 34 strengths in terms of which are your strongest, and moving all the way down in terms of which are your least strong. And it's not that you don't have the strengths at the bottom of the chart, right? It's that working in those domains and those arenas is going to be harder for you. So I should have pulled this up before I started. Let me see if I can find it. Search. Here we go, Clifton Strengths Assessment. So for example, my number one strength is connectedness. And that, the way that Clifton Strengths thinks about that is that doesn't necessarily have to do with being connected to other people, although it might. It has more to do with being connected to what you think of as the sort of larger forces at play in the cosmos, right? I'm just laughing because looking over my strengths, I'm like, yep, that's me. Okay, so you have these strengths. Let me make that go away. So from a business perspective, if you were a business person, that's part of why I took this test, is that I had things that I wasn't able to accomplish in my business. From a business perspective, you don't want to be really hanging out a lot or working a lot in the strengths or in the domains that are way down at the bottom of your list. Yes? You need to be hiring and delegating those types of tasks to other people, right? From a personal perspective, I feel like the Clifton Strengths give you some insight. You might feel differently about it. And maybe that, for example, in your personal life, if empathy is a strength that's low down on your list and that's creating problems in your personal life, it might be a strength that you really want to work on, that you want to work on moving that further up your list, or you want to work on increasing your strength in that arena of your life. But certainly from a work perspective, the way that the strengths are the most effective way to engage these strengths, in my opinion, and the way that I've been coached, is stop trying to do all this shit that isn't really in your wheelhouse. Like, instead have other people do it so that you can shine in the domains where you tend to shine, and other people can shine in the domains where they shine. So there are 34 of these Clifton strengths, but then they split them into 4 domains. And the 4 domains that they split them into are: 1, execution strengths. So execution strengths relate to being able to get shit done. Having a project and executing the tasks of that project, yes? And executing them in like a timely way. The second domain is called strategic. And strategic has to do with strategy, right? The ability to look into the future and conceive of an idea and make some kind of a plan to get there, right? Or start to envision some kind of a route to get to that place. The third domain of Clifton strengths, we have executing, strategic. The third is influencing. Influencing strengths have to do with being able to win others over to your point of view, for example, right? Your ability to inspire other people. Yes, that's influencing. So executing, strategic, influencing, and relationships. And relationships, of course, have to do with your ability, or maybe it's not relationships, maybe it's like relational. Let's see. Relationship building, yes. Okay, so I'm just going to read to you from the Clifton Strengths thing. Executing themes help you make things happen. Influencing themes help you take charge, speak up, and make sure others are heard. Relationship building themes help you build strong relationships that hold a team together. Strategic thinking themes help you absorb and analyze information that informs better decisions. Yes. Okay, so those are the 4 domains of Clifton Strengths. So, I don't know, this might be too much to ask, but like, for those of you that know me, which of those domains do you think I'm strongest in, and which of those domains do you think I'm weakest in? Let's talk about me. Yeah. Oh, Susan Ann says, I got diagnosed with ADHD at 43. Deeply understanding that and valuing the strengths that gives me and developing skills to compensate for my deficits and meds was life-changing. Yeah, huge. That can change your freaking life. When you stop trying to be somebody else, when you allow yourself, when you're compassionate enough with yourself to cherish yourself the way that you are. Doesn't mean that you don't try to grow, right? But that to me is self-compassion, is seeing yourself as you are, cherishing yourself as you are, being compassionate about the parts of yourself that aren't as strong, and loving yourself. That's self-compassion. Okay, so it was a huge win for me when I finally understood that I don't have strengths in certain places, right? Okay, so here's where my strengths, here's the domains that my strengths are in. I have, of those 34 strengths, I have 0 execution strengths. 0. So of the 34 strengths, I didn't have a single strength in the domain of execution. So that doesn't mean that I'm incapable of executing things. I have run a brick and mortar business for 15 fucking years. Yeah, I am perfectly capable of executing things. What it does is it explains why I find that so freaking hard. Why it is so hard for me to stick to a schedule, why it is so hard for me to show up on time for things, why it is so hard for me to follow a plan, why it is hard for me to execute shit. So finding this out about myself, even though I had the ADD diagnosis, there was something about the Clifton Strengths exam, the Clifton Strengths test, that really helped me understand myself. 0 strengths in the executing domain. I also had, I had 1 strength in the influencing domain. So that made some sense to me, because while I feel like I have some influencing capabilities, I don't feel like that's the hugest part of my shtick, right? Like I'm not somebody who has like, I don't know, 10,000 followers on Instagram or what have you. And then the two domains in which I have the most strengths are strategy and relationship building. So strategy, that makes a lot of sense to me that I have a lot of strengths there, because I did run a business for 15 years. And let me tell you how I've done it all this time. I set up automated processes that do the work for me. Like I'm able to see into the future enough to be like to make a strategy for how I'm going to get work done, right? And the other thing I do is I have people that work with me who are good at those things, right? And that comes into the second domain where I have a lot of strengths, which is relationship building. And building relationships, like those of you who are friends of mine or who know me in real life, I love being in relationships with people, and that tends to be something that certainly was a big part of what made my yoga business effective. Is that I before and after each class, I would sit out there before the class and I would talk to people, and I love hearing people's stories. I love I just love knowing things about people. I love interacting with people. Yes. Even though I'm an introverted person, I still enjoy building relationships with people. Like one of my favorite things to do at the yoga studio was just to find out more about what happened in people's lives. And in the All the Feels Facebook group, I love knowing what you guys are thinking about. I love knowing what factors are at play in your lives. I'm good at that, and I like that. Yeah. So when I finally, so first of all, part of what had to happen for me to have this realization about myself, or this new level of self-compassion for myself, is when I took this Clifton Strengths quiz. I finally understood that I don't have strengths in those arenas, right? And that's like mindfulness. That's like Dr. Neff's idea of mindfulness, right? I had this awakening, this newly dawning awareness that, oh yeah, I have strengths in these arenas and not so much in these, right? That's awareness or mindfulness. But then I also realized that I don't have to beat myself up about it. That's self-kindness, right? I don't have to be saying all this rude shit to myself all the time about what a horrible person I am, that I chronically run late, and that I didn't get back to that person on time, right? I can speak kindly to myself about those things. It doesn't mean that I don't try to improve on them. I do, right? But it means that I don't have to be saying all this toxic shit to myself about myself. And then third thing, one of the things that happened was that I took this Clifton Strengths test in the context of this coaching program that I'm in. And so I got to see all these other people's results, right? And I got to talk to other people that have a similar constellation of strengths to mine. And so it was like, oh, I don't have this constellation of strengths and weaknesses. Well, Clifton Strengths tells you not to think of them as weaknesses, right? They describe them as lesser strengths. Okay. It's not that I'm this deeply flawed person with all these character flaws that means that I don't know, I'm doomed to never really experience love in a profound way, or be effective at my job, or any of the bullshit stuff we tell ourselves, right? Other people have this too. And that's the third component that Dr. Neff talks about, right? Is this idea of awareness of the human condition. It's not just me. I'm not the only person on planet Earth that has problems with this, right? And like for you, you are not the only person on planet Earth that has whatever your problems are. And I don't say that at all from like with the like first world problems, stop having your problems, right? Or stop feeling sorry for yourself. And in fact, one of the things Dr. Neff talks about in her book is how people sometimes conflate self-compassion with self-pity, and it's not about that. It's more about, oh look, you're not the only one. You're not alone. So I have one last thing I want to talk about before I have to jump off this and go into my Build a Butt call, and that is what's really cool is that the 4 domains of Clifton strengths correlate really nicely with the 4 suits in tarot. You know, I love tarot. I love magic. So the 4 suits in tarot are pentacles. Pentacles are, here, I'll show you an example. This is what a pentacle is. It used to be coins, right? So you see, this is the Queen of Pentacles. I'm like, am I going? No, I want to go this way. It used to be that in the oldest versions of the tarot deck, pentacles were coins, but then in this particular sort of classic deck, this is the Rider-Waite-Smith deck that I've talked to you about before in this group, he put a pentacle on the coins. And so his 4th suit is pentacles rather than coins. So pentacles is a suit that is associated with the element of earth, and this is the Queen of Pentacles. Yeah, so Kim says her positive psychology teacher, Tal Ben Shabbat, would say, give yourself permission to be human. Yeah. So this is the Queen of Pentacles, and pentacles are associated with the element of earth. And earth is generally, in sort of like the esoteric realm, is associated with the material world, right? That's why pentacles are associated with coins. And in the realm of sort of tarot and all the other sort of types of esoteric studies, earth isn't lesser. It's not that things that have to do with resources are lesser, right? But you do, earth is the realm that we inhabit, and that is one of the realms that we inhabit as living creatures with bodies, and you want to be capable of maneuvering your way through the realm of earth, of this world. So I like to associate that with the Clifton Strengths domain of execution. Okay, this is the Queen of Pentacles. I just picked a pentacle card that I like to show you pentacles, and you see how she's seated in a garden. She's holding this like heavy material object, and she's looking at it fondly. And I think there's a rabbit down in the bottom corner of the picture, right? So that's Queen of Pentacles. So let's talk about swords. That's another suit in tarot. So I picked a random sword card to show you. This is the 2 of Swords. I like this one. I just feel like she kind of seems like a badass, this lady. What's she doing there? I don't know. Why she got the blindfold on? Is the blindfold a reference to blind justice? Is she like a sentinel, like a guard? Does she have those 2 swords? And when somebody comes to attack the people that she loves, would she spring forth even though she's blindfolded and protect them? I don't know. Oh, Karen, don't worry about it. Okay, yeah. Okay, I'll speed up a little bit. Okay, so anyway, swords is usually associated with intellect, okay? And so swords is associated with strategy for me. I associate it with the Clifton Strengths domain of strategy. And don't worry, Karen, it's online, so I can really easily just pop off and hop on Zoom. Okay, swords, strategy. So swords are associated with the element of air, keen, penetrating insight and thinking. Cool, right? Cups. Cups is associated with the element of water, and this is the Cups card I picked for you guys. It's the 6 of Cups, and it's one of my favorites. It's very sweet. It shows a larger child giving a cup, a little bouquet to a smaller child. It's really sweet. So cups as a sweet, they're associated with the element of water, and waters are associated with emotion. Yeah, so that I like to associate that with the Clifton domain of relationship building. Yeah, cups, and you can see they're having a little sweetie relationship here. And lastly, wands. Wands are associated with the element of fire, and fire to me is associated with charisma and just brilliance. Yes, so I like to associate wands with the Clifton Strengths domain of influence. Yeah. So that's just kind of a playful little thing I like to do, right? You could probably work out some kind of system where you associate the Clifton Strengths domains with like you could probably arrange it differently, right? But that's the way that I kind of intuitively associated the strengths with the tarot suites. So thanks for listening. I hope that was interesting for you. It was interesting for me. Thanks for being here. I hope that self-compassion stuff was helpful to you guys. I think that's a very deep and rich practice, and tarot is, of course, a super fun, deep and rich practice and way to get to know yourself. So be kind to yourselves. I'll see you later.